This entire thing since Thursday has been one tone-deaf political disaster after another. I don't know what they are doing because they don't know what they're doing, and no one in America knows what they're doing, and that's why Donald Trump's beating his brains in right now.
And while everybody is melting down over this decision and completely collapsing and their brains exploding, sometimes a clarion voice can cut through and show exactly how hypocritical everyone else in the room is being. And that brings us to CNN and specifically, well, take a look at this moment of clarity from Scott Jennings.
Joe Biden, after cannonballing into an empty swimming pool on Thursday night, came out tonight and spoke for 4 minutes off of a teleprompter. He's good for 4 minutes today, as long as somebody else wrote it. After having this completely tone-deaf sort of announcement coming out of this meeting that you wrote about with his family this weekend, where his son, the notorious influence peddler and crack addict, Hunter Biden, says, you got to keep going. Also, they were hanging out with Annie Leibovich, the photographer, which I wasn't even aware she was taking mugshots now. This entire thing since Thursday has been one tone-deaf political disaster after another. Tonight, he comes out and attacks the Supreme Court and says, oh, the president can now do whatever he wants. The same guy, by the way, whose centerpiece of his speeches is, the Supreme Court tried to stop me. They blocked me, but they'll never stop me on student loans. I don't know what they are doing because they don't know what they're doing, and no one in America knows what they're doing, and that's why Donald Trump's beating his brains in right now.
I'm going to let you.
I mean, that's a bit of a drop the mic moment. You know, they let the one Republican on that network, CNN, they let the one conservative commentator on the show, they let him have 1 minute, and he destroys everybody else on the set for the other 59 minutes of the lamentable spectacle that is a CNN primetime show. And that was beautiful. It was perfect from top to bottom, especially the hypocrisy angle. That Joe Biden is out there saying this is outrageous. This is outrageous that a president can do that. You can't let a president just go rogue and make things up and be immune from all of these things. And meanwhile, well, let's take a look at this president and do a little side-by-side comparison. Now, when the conviction of Donald Trump came down in May in New York, and many people, including Donald Trump, were decrying this as a miscarriage of justice and an absolute out-of-control prosecutor and judge, Joe Biden had some very, very serious admonitions for anybody who would dare question the judicial process in this country.
That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years. And it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation.
God, is it possible he's deteriorated in just 6 weeks? That was stark, the comparison between mid-May and today. Well done, Western Lensman, putting together that side-by-side comparison. Let's be clear here. If anybody dares to challenge a jury verdict in Manhattan, a city that voted 85% against Donald Trump, if you challenge the conviction in that court brought on by a district attorney who created a new law out of whole cloth and never even revealed to the jury what the crime was that they were voting on, whether Donald Trump was guilty of, and all the time, the trial was overseen by a judge whose daughter makes money off of fundraisers for Joe Biden. If you dare to even question that conviction, what did Joe have to say about you?
That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
There you go. Reckless, dangerous, irresponsible of you to dare dissent from that lower court, criminal court in Manhattan with the cake baked against Donald Trump. But then, when the Supreme Court of the land gives you a 6-3 decision that you don't like, what are you allowed to say about it?
Today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away a woman's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation.
You're allowed to say that it undermines the rule of law in the nation. It's almost like Joe Biden is a hypocrite. It's almost like he has a double standard. It's almost like Joe Biden will just do or say whatever he needs to say or do to be politically expedient at the moment. Almost. Oh, but the side-by-side comparisons don't end there. Last night, during his orange face remarks to the nation, he grandstanded and pledged to the American people that he will stay within the confines of the executive powers granted him as president. He was very clear about that.
I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years.
Isn't that nice? It's good to know that he will respect the limits of power that he has. And he'll respect the Supreme Court and their decisions too, because we have separations of power. It's great. Let's just recall how well he respected the Supreme Court in the past.
The Supreme Court blocked me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me.
Can we just roll this back and watch it complete one more time?
I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years. The Supreme Court blocked me from relieving student debt, but they didn't stop me.
Yeah, that's true. Nothing doctored there. That's not a cheap fake, Karine Jean-Pierre. In fact, even Nancy Pelosi affirmed that the president of the United States does not have the executive powers to relieve student loan debt. Remember this golden oldie?
People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
And that's exactly what the Supreme Court said. And now you've got Joe Biden going all around the country campaigning and bragging that he defied the legislative branch, represented by Nancy Pelosi, fellow Democrat, and he defied the Supreme Court. But then last night, he'll have you know that he will respect the boundaries and limits of the executive branch. Oh, we're not done there. We're not done by a long shot. Remember the vaccine mandate?
I rise today in support of my amendment to defund Joe Biden's radical Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Under Joe Biden, OSHA attempted to fire 84 million Americans if they didn't take an experimental vaccine or show their private medical documents to their employer. The Supreme Court had to step in and tell Joe Biden he did not have the authority to force Big Pharma's experimental vaccine on the American people.
Wait a second. The Supreme Court had to tell Joe Biden that he didn't have the authority and he was acting outside the confines of the executive branch? Are you sure about that with the vaccine mandate and federal employees through OSHA? Are you sure about that?
I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years.
Yeah, I don't know. But that COVID vaccine mandate thing, that does kind of ring a bell, doesn't it? Oh, we're not done. No, remember this? It was just a couple of weeks ago.
The action I'm announcing today will go into effect later this summer. And by the way, just as was true in the protection of dreamers, the steps I'm taking today are overwhelmingly supported by the American people, no matter what the other team says.
Yeah, those actions that he took through the executive branch and the presidential powers was to grant amnesty for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people in this country illegally. Now, it's very similar to, as he just said, the DACA amnesty that his predecessor, Barack Obama, put through that's still being challenged in the courts right now. And most courts and most observers say that it will be struck down as unconstitutional eventually. But, listen, when you're exercising powers of the federal government and the executive branch of government, and you're looking to win an election like Barack Obama was in 2012 with the DACA executive order, and now Joe Biden is doing the same thing in an election year with amnesty for married people who are in the country illegally. Well, you can go ahead and do it, win the election, and then 10 years later, if the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional, well, who cares? Because you won, didn't you? I'm sorry, Joe Biden, what was that again about your respect for the rule of law and the limitations of the presidential powers?
I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years.
That's what I thought. So, just off the back of our hand here, we've got the student loan bailouts, we've got the COVID vaccine mandates, and we've got the illegal, unconstitutional amnesty that you've given for illegal immigrants. Right there, without even having to try hard. Those are three major things that Biden not only has done, knowing that it's outside the powers that he has as the president, but actually openly bragging about it. How many times have we heard from this president? Well, Congress hasn't done anything, so I'm going to have to do it. Stop right there. That's unconstitutional. If you're waiting for Congress to do something and they don't do what you want them to do, guess what? They've actually done something. They've turned to you and they've said no. The legislative branch does not have to do what the president tells them to do. So just because Congress didn't do what you wanted them to do doesn't mean you then come up with a weird way of figuring out how to do it yourself by fiat. That's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court's going to smack you down, as they have over and over and over again. And now he stands up and lies to you and says, well, for one, I will stay within the confines of my presidential powers as I have for 3.5 years. He's lying. His brain doesn't function. He has no memory. He can't even speak. And he's a despicable human being. My God, people, please. I'm begging you. Don't let them get away with this. The second you have the opportunity to vote, please do. While you still have a chance.